cool.
There's a couple of moments wondering what happened, because all you see on board are red lights and the engine shut down, so you know that the computers safed the engines, but you don't know why or exactly what went wrong with them. So, you know, those reassuring words, not specifically what went wrong, but reassuring words that everything was okay came very quickly to us. So there weren't many moments of worry. It's mostly just disappointment.
We're all disappointed that we didn't go off. This, I think, is a universal feeling here as well as back in Germany. I think more importantly is to understand why it didn't go off.
Engineers say thanks to a faulty valve, computers sensed more pressure in one of the fuel lines than parameters allow and took steps to command the engines to stop.
That's 3 seconds.
NASA says the astronauts were not in any danger.
It'll probably take some time before we have a good understanding of exactly what happened here this morning.
The shutdown was the third launch pad abort in shuttle program history. Engineers may have to replace the Columbia's engines while the shuttle sits on the launch pad, borrowing some from Endeavour. That work will postpone the German research mission for at least 3 weeks.
One of the astronauts set to blast off this morning is from Hudson, Massachusetts. So when the countdown clock stopped and the shuttle's engine sputtered just seconds before launch, television viewers in the tiny town felt a ripple of alarm. News Center 5's Gail Huff has the story.
And we have another crew member now coming out of Columbia.
For local Hudson astronaut Charles Precourt, it was another disappointment. This time he was only 3 seconds away from liftoff, only to end up grounded. It's the 37-year-old mission specialist's first trip into space.
Emergency powers and became a kind of dictator. He is still president of Russia tonight and still has the now conditional support of President Clinton and the Western allies. But Yeltsin's power struggle with what he calls the Russian reactionaries is far from over. From Moscow, correspondent Anthony Mason begins our coverage of this still developing story.
Silence from the Kremlin today as Russia's political crisis deepened. Boris Yeltsin has not been seen publicly since his television address Saturday, when he moved to break his stalemate with the hardline Congress by declaring emergency rule. If the crisis is not resolved, he said, the country will be pushed into anarchy. The Chief Justice of Russia's highest court has already called that move a state coup. He and his court were meeting through the night to rule on its constitutionality.
You can call the Crime Stoppers spacecraft. It's called the Delta Clipper. It is the first spacecraft able to make vertical takeoffs and landings. This test in the New Mexico desert lasted 2 minutes and 10 seconds. NASA is looking for a totally reusable.
I copy that. Launch director NCD. Let's go. And GLS, please remove the hold at T-minus 31. Copy and work.
T-minus 1 minute and counting. All systems are go. All systems have been reported go for launch of Discovery. Less than 1 minute away now from the historic return of John Glenn to space.
I copy and attention all stations. The countdown clock will continue.
GLS is go for auto sequence start.
Discovery's onboard computers now have control of vehicle functions. T-minus 20 seconds. T-minus 15. T-minus 10, 9, 8. We have a go for engine start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Discovery with a crew of 6 astronaut heroes and 1 American legend.
Houston Discovery, roll program.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
1 minute and 50 seconds into the flight. Discovery now at an altitude of 25 miles, traveling at a speed of 2,900 miles an hour. The next event will be burnout and separation of Discovery's twin solid rocket boosters.
Discovery Houston, 2-engine Banjul.
Copy, 2-engine Banjul.
Capcom Susan Still informing the crew that in the event of a single engine failure,
Performance nominal.
Copy, performance nominal.
Discovery could now reach the transatlantic abort site at Banjul. However, telemetry indicating all 3 engines continuing to perform well, and Discovery's performance to this point, 2.5 minutes into the flight, has been as expected. Discovery now traveling at a speed of 3,500 miles per hour at an altitude of 43 miles. Downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, 70 miles. All systems are continuing to perform well. 3 minutes into the flight, Discovery now traveling at a speed of 3,850 miles per hour. Downrange from the Kennedy Space Center at a distance of 86 miles. Just about 5 minutes of powered flight remaining on board. Three minutes and 40 seconds into the flight, Discovery now traveling at a speed of 4,600 miles per hour. Downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, just about 135 miles.
The news is now. Now, coverage you can count on. This is News Center 5.
Now at 11, the magic of history in the making. Chet Curtis reports live on John Glenn's return to space. Did the Department of Social Services make a mistake when it pulled a 9-year-old out of school? And WCVB launches the next generation of television in Boston, WCVB DT. Good evening. It has truly been a day for the ages.
I'll say right now the Space Shuttle Discovery is in orbit. John Glenn is checked in with Earth. It's quite a different mission from the one that made history 36 years ago. Then Glenn orbited the Earth 3 times in a trip that lasted 5 hours. Today, his 9-day mission will take him around the globe 144 times. Chet Curtis reports tonight from the Kennedy Space Center.
Natalie, it was 3 hours and 10 minutes into the flight, but finally, Mission Commander Kurt Brown told us something about the condition of payload specialist John Glenn.
The record show that John has a smile on his face and it goes from one ear to the other one, and we haven't been able to remove it yet.
NASA's most prized relic, 77-year-old John Glenn, is one happy camper tonight, truly enjoying the show.
Hello, Houston. This is PS2, and they let me get sprung out of the middeck for a little while. We're just going by Hawaii, and that is absolutely gorgeous. The best part is do a trite old statement, 0G, and I feel fine.
That trite old statement is one uttered by John Glenn during his Mercury flight 36 years ago. The launch today was awesome, and for those of us privileged to witness the liftoff up close and personal, unforgettable. A cheer went up here at the Space Center, and from the tens of thousands who watched from every conceivable vantage point along the Space Coast. President and Mrs. Clinton watched their first launch here and worried with us when a closer look at the launch video showed a piece of the spacecraft falling off at liftoff. What came off here was a hatch that covered the drag chute used to slow the shuttle on landing.
That's not a big thing. The drag chute is very nice to have. That's why it's on there. But we flew 40-some-odd missions without one.
There was another quirky glitch that briefly held up the flight, the discovery of some airplanes in restricted airspace.
What's unusual about it is that there were 5. Usually, if you get one, it's only 1.
You never know who you might run into at a shuttle launch. The man from Margaritaville, author, composer, musician, pilot, and reporter for Rolling Stone magazine. Now I know. You having a ball?
Yeah, you know, like as a pilot, which you understand, you know, this is the ultimate machine out there. So, and then, you know, spending all the years in Florida that I have, I've come to several of these before. And, you know, if you haven't been to one, you don't understand. Once that thing goes off, it's addicting.
Jimmy Buffett. That's it from the Kennedy Space Center for now. I'll be back a little later in the broadcast.
Well, young and old all across America are cheering John Glenn's rocket ride. Perhaps the loudest cheers came from Glenn's hometown in Ohio, where hundreds gathered today. But the cheers were pretty loud here in New England as well. News Center 5's Steve Sprasia is live at the Museum of Science in Boston. Steve?
Well, Brian, this place with its mock-up of the Mercury capsule and other space paraphernalia serves to remind younger generations that space travel is several decades old. But John Glenn's return to space has done something that no exhibit could do. It's returned excitement to space travel.
9, 8, 7, 6.
From the young watching Glenn rocket into space for the first time, to seniors who remember Glenn's first trip into orbit, there was fascination.
Very inspiring, very much so. Brings tears to my eyes.
Eyes that have seen much history, and Glenn's first orbital mission was among the most fascinating.
He paved the way at that time because not too many people were interested in space.
But soon, many followed in Glenn's footsteps. Al Sacco Jr. was one of them.
Space Shuttle Columbia catapulting scientific knowledge through microgravity research.
Almost 3 years ago to the day, Sacco rode Columbia as a payload specialist to conduct experiments just like John Glenn. But he knows that Glenn will be eyeing something more than science on this flight.
He's going to be looking out the window. I guarantee you he's going to be looking out the window. And he'll be running some of those tests and looking out the window, running some of those tests and looking out the window. And he's just going to be awestruck. He's going to remember back. He's going to get that feeling of comfort that you get in orbit.
The senior citizens who watch Glenn take off keep active, and Al Sacco says an active senior citizen like John Glenn will do okay in space.
Generally, the older you were, the better you did in microgravity. And they don't know why that is. Some of the young and real fit Superman kind of astronauts would have difficulty adjusting for the first few days. Not all of them, but some of them.
The most obvious difference for John Glenn, take a look at it. This space capsule here be like going into space in a phone booth as opposed to going into space in something the size of an ice skating rink. Reporting live from the Museum of Science, I'm Steve Sprasia, News Center 5 Tonight. Natalie?
Thank you, Steve. Today's event was dubbed One Big Block Party, and not just at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. In New York City, thousands of people watched yet another historic event on the Times Square Jumbotron. Pretty exhilarating, especially if you had a front row seat. Certainly one person who did down in Florida was Chet Curtis. You're the envy of many people here. Chet, tell me, there are some people who are somewhat critical of Glenn's flight, if you can imagine that, on this exhilarating day, saying it's just a lot of hoopla and not much science.
Well, I say that's too bad, Natalie. I know Chuck Yeager was critical of it, but I'd also venture to say that Mr. Right Stuff would be here in a flash if he could get a seat on the next shuttle flight. Now, Glenn is going to perform several scientific experiments, and here's just a couple of them. You know, he's going to do one on sleep disturbance. For example, astronauts tend not to sleep as long as they should because their bodies can't adjust to the light cycles. They're going to do some experiments on that subject. In space, as in old age, the body breaks down muscles and proteins at a faster rate, and the process, they think, can be accelerated by stress. Glenn will be taking blood and urine samples, and they're going to try to do some research on that. All in all, there'll be 80 experiments on this flight, and most observers say that they're have scientific validity. Now, if Glenn's going back into space has attracted more attention for the NASA space effort, that's terrific. The effort, the interest has been flagging. It's now been renewed, and everybody's enthusiastic about it, and that's wonderful.
I think most people would probably agree with you, Chet. Thank you very much. We hope you stay with News Center 5 as with our continuing coverage for this entire 9-day shuttle Discovery mission. And it's kind of interesting to note that the entire operation now has moved from the Kennedy Space Center to Houston.
All right, turning now to the race for governor. Tonight, Scott Harshbarger pulled out a major weapon in his re-election arsenal.
Tobacco companies. For our children and our future, please join me in supporting Scott Harshbarger for governor.
Harshbarger's campaign claims this is the only ad that Hillary Clinton has produced for any candidate in the nation. Harshbarger's campaign is clearly hoping the ad will help make up some of the gap apparent in recent polls.
I've always been underestimated, always been the underdog, and at the end I win. And that's because, you know, the people of this state, you know, are going to make you earn this.
I feel momentum. I think people are focusing on the economy, and the economy of Massachusetts is strong because we've made this state competitive.
Natalie's At Home with the Candidates reports air this Monday. Tune in for an inside look at Cellucci, Harshbarger, and their families.
A former girlfriend of Salvatore Siccari today described a callous confession of Jeffrey Curley's murder. Charlene Letourneau testified about a telephone conversation she had with Siccari the day of the murder. In exchange for immunity, Letourneau told the jury that Siccari told her he, quote, hurt somebody really bad.
I said, you're on the phone telling me that you just killed somebody and you have no remorse. And he said I could give two. It's like a bowl of cereal to me. I could either eat it or walk away from it.
Jurors also heard from the head of security at Home Depot. That is where Siccari and the second suspect, Charles Janes, allegedly bought a plastic container and bags of cement, which were used to dispose of Jeffrey's body. The testimony is expected to continue on Monday.
Tonight, a little Boston girl is safe and sound after a frantic search that turned out to be all for naught. While officers looked for 9-year-old Jennifer Castelli, she was actually at home with her new foster family. DSS had taken her from school after leaving a phone message with Jennifer's family. But her family never received it and called police when Jennifer didn't show up after an after-school program.
We notified the foster parent by leaving a message on her answering machine, which is something that we should not have done. We should not have made any type of removal without having a person-to-person, face-to-face contact with her.
Jennifer had been staying here with her cousin. DSS is now considering if she should be granted legal custody.
On the Health Beat today, a landmark decision in the prevention of breast cancer. The FDA today gave approval for women to use tamoxifen to cut their risk of getting a tumor. Tamoxifen can have life-threatening side effects, and because of that, it can only be taken by healthy women with a very high risk of breast cancer. The FDA has also demanded that doctors carefully consider the women to which it describes the treatment.
I'm Jorge Quiroga. Remember spitballs and paper airplanes? How about laser pointers, potentially dangerous, and the latest prank in the classroom? That story coming up.
Plus new allegations in the Louise Woodward case.
And it's not your parents' TV. We'll show you what the new age of television looks like.
And a blustery Friday is on the way. All the gusty details coming up in a few minutes.
Of what's actually happening. It's as it was advertised. It's impressive.
HDTV sets offer a better picture because they have more of those little dots called pixels that make up the picture. HDTV sets are also shaped more like a movie screen. And because transmitters send HDTV as digital information, reception will be like a computer screen, always sharp and clear.
The HDTV looks pretty good. It's a sharper picture, better color, looks good.
Want one?
Are you buying one?
Not for you. They won't be cheap, at least not at first.
Well, right now, some of the more expensive sets with the best performance are running about $7,000 for a complete system, but there's different levels of performance you can jump into. With Panasonic equipment, you can even jump in with standard definition for roughly $2,500.
It'll be years before TV stations and program producers change all their equipment to HD TV cameras and tape recorders. Until then, you'll be able to watch either regular or HD TV on either kind of set using a converter box.
Regular old TV will stay on the air for years. It'll probably be more than a decade before HDTV takes it over, and we're all watching that wondering, we used to watch the old stuff? At the Museum of Science, David Ropeek, News Center 5 tonight.
Now, meteorologist Dick Albert and the Weather Center 5 forecast.